Welcome to my channel. I am Maricita Colors in English. Hola, bienvenidos a mi canal. Soy Maricita Colors en inglés. Today I will make a baby dress in crochet. I decorate with these green flowers. And I use double yarn because it was so teeny and the hook number 3,50 millimeters. The fantasy stitch is 3 double crochet without finish. Double crochet, vareta or punto alto en español. The dress I make from the neck. From this part I start. And I didn't make shoes because it's only one piece. And I use all the fantasy stitch in all the dress. I make increases, and after this, at the end, I only make the skirt with the same stitches. The size of my dress is of this jumper. Is a jumper for babies between 1 and 2 months. So I use this dress with the neck, with the same size of this neck. Here I have approximately 17 centimeters in front of this jumper, and in the back of the neck I have 12. Together are 29 centimeters. You must calculate like this with the size that you want. It's better that you have a dress or a t-shirt of the size that you want. The length of this jumper is from the shoulder until the foot is almost 38 centimeters of long, and the width is 20 centimeters altogether. And in the armhole I have 10 centimeters approximately. Here in the waist I have 52 centimeters approximately. Welcome to my channel. I am Maricita Colors in English. We begin. Empezamos. I will need 1 scissors and a big needle for sew the yarns at the end. For make the little pattern, I will use this yarn that is a little thick, and I will use the hook 3,50 millimeters. My dress has 59 chains plus 3 chains more. Every yarn and every hook make of different size your thread, remember. Here I will make 19 chains plus 3 chains. So this is my technique like I make my chains. Cadenetas en español. 18, 19 chains. 19 cadenetas, and plus I make 3 chains. 1, 2 y 3 cadenetas. Now I will insert the hook in the third chain. Yarn over the hook. Insert the hook in the third chain. We bring the yarn. Now I have 3. Now I pass for 2. And this is like 1 double crochet without finish. The chains of the beginning are like the first double crochet. So in the same stitch, I must make another double crochet without finish. So yarn over the hook, we insert in the same stitch, we bring the yarn, yarn over the hook, and we pass for 2. Only for 2 loops. And now I have like 3 double crochet without finish. Yarn over the hook, and we pass for the 3 loops. And I make 1 chain. It's important, this chain. Now I will skip the next stitch. Yarn over the hook, we skip the next, And in the next stitch we insert and we repeat all. We bring the yarn and now we have 3 loops. Yarn over the hook, we pass for 2 loops. And now I have like 1 double crochet without finish. Yarn over the hook and we insert in the same stitch and we repeat 3 times. After this, yarn over the hook and we pass only for 2 loops. And now I have like 2 double crochet without finish. Yarn over the hook, we insert in the same stitch, we bring the yarn over the hook and we pass for the 2 loops. And now I have like 3 double crochet without finish. Yarn over the hook and we pass for the 4 loops. And we make the chain. It's important the chain because we skip 1 stitch and this chain move to our thread. Yarn over the hook, we skip the next and we go in the next and we repeat all in this row. 3 double crochet without finish in the same stitch. For make your dress, first you must make 1 pattern with 1 row, and with this row you must compare with the neck of the dress that you want to make. Here I close and the chain. So I will make in all these chains and I will back for show you how I finish this row. Here almost I finish this row of the neck of my dress. Here I made the fantasy stitch, the chain, and in the first chain I make the last fantasy stitch. With this pattern you must to compare with the size of the neck in the dress that you want to make. You can make this for all the A's. Remember that every chain or every yarn and every hook make different size of our threads. When I have the 4 loops, I close and I make 1 chain. Okay, now I will show you how you must to calculate with your pattern. Here I have 10 fantasy stitch. So always you must to compare with the neck of the clothes of a t-shirt, blouse of the person that you want to make. Here until here I have 10 and until here I have 7 fantasy stitches. So 10 plus 7 is 17 in the part in front of our neck, and in the back I must make 2 for calculate. This is the back of my jumper, and here I try to make, don't must be exactly, don't worry. So until here I have 10 and plus 2 fantasy stitches. So is 12 plus 17 is 29 fantasy stitches. Now I will make the second row, segunda hilera. I will make 3 chains. The size of these chains must be the size of 1 double crochet. So you can make 2, you can make 3 chains. We turn the crochet work and I will make increases. In this arc, in this first arc, I will make 2 fantasy stitch together. So here I make the 3 double crochet without finish. We close the 4 and we make the chain. And in the same arc I will make increases. So I will make another fantasy stitch in the same arc, arco en español. Don't forget the chains, cadenetas en español. In the next arc, I will make one fantasy stitch, but without increases. Here only I will make one fantasy stitch, the chain of separation, and in the next arc I make another fantasy stitch. I make in this row 2 double crochet or 2 fantasy stitch together and 2 fantasy stitch alone. Here you can see the increase in the first arc, and in the next 2 arcs I make only one fantasy stitch. So in this next arc I will make one increase. So one increase is 2 fantasy stitch in the same arc. Always you must make the chain of separation between fantasy stitch. So here I have the 4 loops with close and the chain. So I will repeat and I will show you how I finish this row. Here I make the second row 2 fantasy stitch alone and one increase, 2 fantasy stitch alone and one increase. So here after these 2 fantasy stitch alone, in the edge, en la esquina, in the chain, inside of this chain of the beginning, I will make one fantasy stitch. I don't make increases in the edge, only one. And here I make the last fantasy stitch, el último punto fantasía. For begin the next row, I make 3 chains. The front of my work is where is the yarn of the beginning. In the right, this is the front of my thread. So the dress I will close like this. Here in this third row, I will make the increases every 3 fantasy stitch alone. In this first arc, always I make one increases. Always I begin with the increases in the first arc. Here I make the increases. When I have the 4 loops, we close the 4 and we make the chain of separation, la cadeneta de separación. And here I will make 3 fantasy stitch alone. In every arc, one fantasy stitch. Here I have the 3 fantasy stitch, one in every arc. I make the chain of separation, and in this arc I make the increases. Here I have the increases. Now I will continue with the 3 fantasy stitches alone, and I will back when I finish this row. Here I finish the row, or almost I finish the row, and I have the 3 fantasy stitch alone, and in the edge I don't make increases. I only make one fantasy stitch. I insert the hook inside of this chain, and here I make the last fantasy stitch. I don't make increases in the edge of my dress. Here I will close the 4 loops, and this chain you can count with the 3, 1, 2 and 3. You don't must to make the 4 like I make before, only you must make 3 chains. Here I will begin the 4th row, and in this 4th row I will make every 4 fantasy stitch in every arc, I will make 1 increases, but always I make the first increases in the first arc. Here, after that I make the increase in the first arc, I must make 1 fantasy stitch in 4 arcs. Here I finish this 4 row, hilera en español. Every 4 fantasy stitch alone, I make 1 increases. Here I have the 4 fantasy stitch alone. So in the edge, in the third chain, I will make the last fantasy stitch without increases, only 1 fantasy stitch. When I have the 4 loops, we close the 4, and here I make 1 chain, but always I make 3 chains, so you don't must make 4, only must make only 3. 1, 2, and 3. And we turn the crochet work. In this 5 row, I didn't make increases, because sometimes when you make a lot of increases, the skirt is a little so freely. So for this, in this row in my dress, I make in every arc only 1 fantasy stitch. So in this row we don't make increases. Always between every fantasy stitch, don't forget to make the chain of separation. No te olvides de tejer la cadeneta, chain, cadeneta de separación, separation, separación en español. So here I will continue, and we see us when I finish this row. Always you must make all the fantasy stitches between every fantasy stitch of the previous row. Here I finished this 5 row, and in every arc I made only 1 fantasy stitch. And here always I made the last fantasy stitch in the chain, in the third chain of the edge. When I have the 4 loops, I close, and from here I only will make the 3 chains. After that we make the 3 chains, we turn the crochet work, and we begin the 6th row. In this 6th row I make increases again. In the 4th row I made every 4 fantasy stitch 1 increase. Here I will make every 5 fantasy stitches 1 increases, but always in the beginning, in the first arc, we make the first increase. Here I have the first increase, that is 2 fantasy stitch in 1 arc. So in the next arc I will make 5 fantasy stitches, 1 in every arc. This is the same technique like I make my Benny hats in crochet. You can see here in my channel Maricita Colors in English. So here I have the 5 fantasy stitches alone, and in the next arc I made the increase. So the increases are a little more far away in every row. Row, hilera en español. So here I will make the 5 fantasy stitches and the increases. And now almost I finish this 5 or 6 row. Every 5 fantasy stitches I make 1 increases. So here in the edge I don't must make 1 increase, I only make the last fantasy stitch. Fantasy stitch, punto fantasía en español. Double crochet, vareta o punto alto en español, hook, ganchillo or aguja, yarn, hilo en español. Now I make the 3 chains, we turn the crochet work, volteamos el tejido, and you can see how is a little more big our thread. In this 7th row, séptima hilera, I don't make increases. Only I will make one fantasy stitch in every arc without increases. So we see us when I finish this 7th row. Always you must make the chain between every fantasy stitch, and I insert the hook in the 3rd chain, and here I make the last fantasy stitch, el último punto fantasía. I invite you to subscribe here in my channel. Maricita Colors in English is totally free, and you can find me in Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Here I make the 3 chains, 3 cadenettes, and here I will give you one tip. So, sometimes when our threads are a little frilly, I made after the increases one row without increases. So, in my dress I have a little frilly, so I alternate the rows without increases with the increases. If your thread is normal without the frilly, you can continue with the increases with the same technique. This part I have 9 rows, and here I pass in this 9 row one lace that you can make for decorate, and I have these rows that is a flower Rosita or flower Rosita, and you can find here in my channel Maricita Colors in English. So we turn the crochet work after the 3 chain, and now I will make the 8th row, and here I will make 2 fantasy stitches in this arc. So this is one increase. Always the chain of separation after the increase. And now in this row I will make 6 fantasy stitches alone. So one in every arc. So now I have the 6 fantasy stitches after the first increase, and here again in the next arc I make the fantasy stitch, the increases that are 2 fantasy stitches in one arc, and I will repeat in all this row, hilera en español, and always you must make the chain of separation between fantasy stitch. Now I almost finished this 8th row. Every 6 fantasy stitch alone, I make one increase, 6, 6 en español. So, after these 6 fantasy stitches alone, I must make the last fantasy stitch, and here again I don't make increases. So, I insert the hook in the 3rd chain that we always make in the previous row, and I made the last fantasy stitch, el último punto fantasía. When I have the 4 loops, we close the 4 and we make the 3 chains, 3 cadenetas, and we turn the crochet work. Here in my dress, I made this last 9 in Dutch row without increases. So here in this 9 row, I will make only one fantasy stitch in every arc. Here almost I finished the 9 row. In every stitch I only make one, or in every arc I only make one fantasy stitch. And always I make the chain of separation, and in the last, where is the third chain, I make the last fantasy stitch, el último punto de fantasía. Now, after this row, I will show you how you must, or how I calculate for make the skirt of my dress. And here I finish this 9 row. I always compare with my jumper. Here, from the armhole to the another armhole, I have 22 centimeters. So I must make from armhole to armhole, I must make the 22 centimeters. That is the same in my jumper. So here, between these 22 centimeters, I have 16 fantasy stitch that must be the same in the back. So is 16 plus 16 are 32 fantasy stitches. 32 less all the stitches that I have in the 9 row, that are 76 fantasy stitches, less the 32 are 44 fantasy stitches. These 44 I must make between 2 because are for the arms. So every arm must have 22 fantasy stitches. So in the back I have 8 in the left and 8 in the right, but are 16 all together. So I made the separation first with 8 of the back, 22 from the arm, 16 from the front of my dress, the 22 I let 22 of the arm, and the 8 of the back of my dress. So, by example, if you have 80 in all the 9 row, and here you make filage, maybe you have 20 stitches that are the size of the armhole to armhole hole. So it's 20 plus 20 of the back are 40, and 40 less the 80 are 40. And these 40 you must make in 2 parts for the arms of our dress. I will show you here in my pattern. And always you must try to have pairs numbers. So 20, 30, 32, 44. This is number par in Spanish. I will count here how many stitches I have. Here I have 22 fantasy stitches, and I will finish, and in the next arc I make the 23 fantasy stitch, 23 en español, always a chain. Here in this arc I made the 24, and plus the last is 25. So I must make a number pair. So for make one number pair in this 9 row, I will make one increase in this arc. So I will make 26 stitches in this 9 row. You must have the number part for that our thread is uniform, uniforme en español. You always try to compare the size of your dress where you begin the skirt, you must compare with the armhole of the dress or t-shirt or blouse of the person that you want to make. This dress you can make for all the size. So here I finish with 26 and I will back in the second part of my dress, Sophia. So we see us in the second part of this crochet pattern. Ciao, ciao.